Want to have your own business but don't want to start from scratch? Franchising might be the answer you're looking for. Welcome to the Level Up with Nick Lopez show. The show that brings you thought leaders in business, franchising, and high-performance personal development. Whether you're a buyer, seller, franchisee, franchisor, or a consultant, find everything you need to know about franchising right here. Own a business without the pain and financial losses that come with creating it. Find the time, freedom, and financial independence you can have through entrepreneurship. Learn how franchising can help you get there. Listen up and get ready for another episode of the Level Up with Nick Lopez show.
Welcome to the Level Up show with Nick Lopez, where we have the absolute pleasure of learning from thought leaders in business, franchising, and high performance personal development. Today, most certainly goes without exception. We have a gentleman on the show who has over 30 years of experience in HR outsourcing. He is currently the VP of Sales and Strategic Partnerships with an organization called Zynergia. Tony Winckowski, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate it. And you got all the complicated names like my last name correct, so thank you.
Oh, let's go. Yeah, it's a great last name. Like I said, I was and am very excited to kick off the show and give some context to the audience and help them level up around this whole concept of HR outsourcing. Clearly, you're an expert, over 30 years in the space. My goodness, as we all know, business is all about the people. And this man here, ladies and gentlemen, has built his career around helping small companies compete, small and mid-sized companies compete with the big boys, organizations that hire over thousands of folks, HR outsourcing, such important work to bring value to business owners, much like myself, frankly. And so personally, that's why I'm excited for this conversation. I will nerd out plenty throughout. So just so you know, Tony. But anyways, before we dive in, we're in this space of franchising, and most folks don't necessarily have an idea that franchising is just about anything. If it's legal, ethical, and makes money, it can be franchise. Things like painting brands, ice cream shops, cookie stores, you name it, it can be franchise. It's not just McDonald's and Burger King and the like, which so many times, that's what the just everyday person thinks about franchising. And so franchising has this interesting way of finding folks. You don't necessarily lift up your hand and say, hey, I'm going to get into franchising. And so you have a very interesting story. I'm interested to hear. Tony, how did franchising find you?
Great question, Nick. And it is crazy that franchising did find me. So I went to school to be a veterinarian. Weed out chemistry weeded me right out. Didn't know what I was going to do. Was a blackjack dealer for a couple of years in Lake Tahoe. Excellent life. Had to go and do something else. And I got into sales. And I wasn't really a salesperson. I actually was opposite of a salesperson when I first started. But eventually learned how to work with small and mid-sized businesses. And what I found that I really enjoyed was the HR piece, the human resources, people that make up companies. And I really enjoyed the idea of the underdog and helping small, mid-sized businesses. And so I ended up going into the route of HR business services, which then led into an HR outsourcing focus. And when in the sales arena, if you're passionate about what you do, you just do it better. And you really enjoy it. And you really are motivated to see the outcomes, the successful outcomes, and how you can help those small businesses. So at the time, I was working with Paychex, and I had my first opportunity. Franchising came to me. Of course, there was the franchise owners that owned a McDonald's or a Subway or other brands, line painting, that we would talk to about their payroll. However, we never really got into a situation where we could provide an option for a large group, the franchisor and the franchise system. So my first taste of that was with Paychex, and we had a customer that did that's what they did, was franchise brands. And I was asked to be a part of it. It was actually in my territory. I was a senior manager at the time, and I was asked to participate, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fun to see it coming to life, a brand coming to life, and then really learning about the model. And the more that I learned about the franchise model, the more I got really interested, because really, I like doing systems. And when you look at the franchise model from my perspective, it really is it's a playbook that if you execute it, and depending on how well you execute it, you can be successful. And that's the hard part for a lot of folks who are entrepreneurial, that want to go out there and put themselves on the line to be successful and to be an owner. So that was my first time. So I did that. It was a lot of fun. We had some success. The second time came around when I was with TriNet, and it was awesome to be asked again to lead up a national franchise team. So we worked from scratch, and we put together a program that TriNet could offer, as well as I had a team that we worked with, and I had amazing people on that team. So I was very fortunate that not only were we able to have the backing and the energy of the organization, but also with the folks. And this is where we really dove into the franchise world. And this is where I found out that human capital was the key, in my mind, the key to success. I had started learning that human capital is the key to success for most businesses. But in the franchise world, with the joint employer doctrine, learning about that and seeing that come into play, you really figured out that, in the world of a business, any business, if you think about a pie being a business plan, there is a sliver of this pie, depending on the industry, depending on the type of business, that is made up of what is influenced by the employees. And I call that human capital. And it could be 10%, it could be 30%, it could be 50%. And if you think about it, franchisor provides this wonderful playbook from the business point of view. But the one piece that you really can't get into is the human capital. So more so, the human capital is important for all businesses. But when you look at the franchise system, franchisor, and the franchisees, human capital really becomes the key to success of, can you execute the franchise playbook that's given by the franchisor to the best of its abilities.
And in between, there is this underdog theme. Your career, you've appreciated this underdog mentality. Yeah. And so what do you mean by that?
Well, first off, I'm entrepreneurial if I work within an organization. So I have amazing admiration for entrepreneurs. So to me, if you're an entrepreneur and you have the intestinal fortitude to lay it on the line and put it out there, you have my utmost respect. So my thinking and my thought has always been, how can I support these folks to compete with when I first started back in the day with Fortune 500 companies, their Fortune 1000 companies, how can I help them be able to compete? And as you go into this, you start finding out there's a lot of opportunities for small and mid-sized businesses to take advantage of things that they just don't know about. Most folks are experts at what they do, but they may or may not be experts with businesses. So in my mind, if I can help directly or indirectly bring those resources to them, that gives me a lot of personal pleasure, which then, of course, I think is what leads us as humans to do what we do.
Yeah, it's interesting in the franchise space, right? Specifically in home services, you're building an organization that's national, it's standardized, and yet your direct competition is mom and pa's. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, you're the big fish in the pond.
Yeah, without a doubt.
That's interesting, right? Just to hit on that piece, and that's specific for home improvement. It's unique to home improvement.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. And I think that the ability to take advantage of the resources that are available, and having centers of influence that can help you do that is critical to success. And then being able to create programs in place for you in that space to be able to find the best talent and develop them and retain them is going to increase your abilities to be successful.
It's interesting that home services is taking an approach of, the franchising is really, that big fish in the pond when you have unsophisticated mom and pa's that traditionally haven't had solid processes, and so much of a very fragmented space is being standardized at a pretty rapid rate. And clearly, human capital is a big part of getting ahead in that competitive advantage, especially when you start talking about owning and operating multiple territories. To your point, that's really where a lot of folks find much success, is being a multi-unit owner. You're going to need human capital to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets, that's to me, that I think it's very interesting for me, and that is really the key. Sometimes the barrier for success of a franchise or a franchisee is, it's not that the plan didn't work, it wasn't the location. It's the idea that how do I duplicate myself? Like you said, many folks, this is their first time even in business, and we've run into them in the outsourcing world, and they're working harder now in their retirement as a franchise owner than they were at their day job for the previous 40 years. And so being an owner is already hard enough as it is. And if you don't give yourself the best chance by having the best folks to execute the game plan, you made it harder. So let's just assume that you're able to accomplish that. And there's a lot of great leaders that when they're local and in their unit, they're fantastic. But how do now you get a second unit? Now you got more time. You have, it's not necessarily double the amount of work. It could be even more than double the amount of work and double headaches. And then you go 3, 4, and we all know that as you build more units, that's how you're building that wealth that you're trying. That many of the franchisees, that's their goal and objective. Well, it becomes virtually impossible to have remote locations and be able to be as good unless you find somebody that can think, act, and be in step with you. And that's really, I don't want to say impossible, that's really hard. So one of the things that you can do is really understand what's important for the brand, the types of employees that do best. What are they going to be doing? Like, what are the skills that are necessary short term? And then if I'm going to be potentially expanding either my current territory or I'm going to add more units, do I have people that I can take and then that are capable enough to then move into a leadership role and take on that responsibility? And if they've been growing up underneath you and they understand the program, you basically have done the perfect thing, because you can stamp that person goes over and then stamps this new unit identically to what they've grown up in and what they understand how to do. So that's the ideal case. But for a lot of folks, they don't have that. So being able to have a game plan, to understand what you need best, understand to have tools and techniques that help you find the best people. But once you find the world's changed, Nick, and it used to be, hey, find a good people to come on board and you're off and running. It's not like that anymore. You need to really make sure that if you don't have a plan, having a basic plan is a great first step. If you have a basic plan, getting it more complex in this day and age is critical. It is amazing the amount of work that is needed once you hire somebody for that first year, what you need to do on the onboarding process from even before they step foot into your location. There's so many things you need to do in order to keep that person and make sure that they stay and they see not only what they thought they were coming into as an employee for you, but also to see the opportunities for the future. And it's gotten really demanding. And then you start throwing, just in the last week alone, I had a couple articles come across my desk, And you find that 1 in 3 Americans have lied during the interview process and the onboarding process, and 4 in 10 hiring managers have lied in the interview process. You can see that there's a lot of, I don't think people set out to do that. I think what ends up happening is that they're stuck and they don't have a solution. So being able to have solutions to help you as hiring managers, correctly be in line with the leadership of your group, to make sure that you are clearly spelling out what that looks like and being confident in what you're providing your folks. I think that's critical. Being able to have tools to help ferret out folks that may or not be telling you the truth. In all cases, when it comes to what their abilities are, their background, I think it's very critical for success, because the last thing you want to do is do everything right except for maybe the ferreting out of that person's abilities and backgrounds, and then you have somebody on board, because now you got somebody on board and it's a lot more work to correct the situation or extricate yourself from that situation.
Yeah, so often you hear simplicity scales.
Yeah,
right. What you're saying is, hey, you actually need to be pretty sophisticated nowadays. It used to be a lot simpler retention, but retention has become a little bit more dynamic. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think simplicity does scale. So I think you're spot on with that. And I think if you frame that, the amount of work that we talk and the complexity I just was kind of sharing with you. Now, would you need that for one unit? Absolutely not. But as you're going on, I think as you are expanding, you need to, it gets harder to be, be omnipresent. I think you need to have those tools. But to me, having a system, I think, could be that simplicity we're talking about. So having that is critical. I think what has become dynamic is because the world we live in is making sure that what maybe we grew up with when we started our working world and what was onboarding isn't necessarily what onboarding looks like today. What retention used to look like, hey, pay a fair rate and offer some benefits, that used to work, doesn't necessarily work today. People can find that nowadays, especially what's really interesting with the world of virtual work and how we've kind of, international society, you can find those opportunities. What people are looking for is something that will help them today with their goals, but they're also looking at the future. And as a franchise owner, if I'm not considering that, as long as I'm aware that that's a possibility or an outcome of my relationship with these people, that's fair. Because again, business practices are business practices, and you got to do what works for you and how you feel with it. But you feel good about it. But you better be aware of what the potential outcomes are. And for a lot of folks I've talked with over the years, they want to bring on people and they want them to be with them for a long time. And as we talk about, the ideal case is having that person come up underneath you and then going out and then managing one of your locations, because then you're in sync and it's going to be your chances of success are greatly improved. So I guess what I was talking about with the dynamic piece of that, Nick, is that what worked 5 years ago may or may not work for you today. And you don't need to be changing all the time, because who wants to do that in life? But being aware of what's going on and what's the trends, I think is a very good use of time and energy.
Right, absolutely. And a great process creates that simplicity. So speaking of which, right, you have a human capital playbook. There's a basic and advanced component. Would you mind elaborating?
Sure. I think basics. So I think when you think about basic components, it's just making sure that you're executing the basics, which is making sure you're hiring the best possible person. And it's not about just putting out a job description, but it's really understanding, what is this role today and what is this role in the future? So a basic component is having a hiring process. So that's basic. I got to put together a job description. I'm going to find my sources, best chances of finding the people out there. So where am I going to source my people? And I think that's very basic and is very important. However, as your needs, depending on your location, depending on the type of position you're looking for, it can get more and more advanced. And so the basics to me are simple things like, hey, do you know what an A candidate looks like for you? A B candidate, a C candidate? Do you know what that looks like? And when I talk to a lot of owners, business owners, they don't think in those terms. They didn't understand that. And then as far as this role, what's the importance of this role? Is this like a critical role or is this not a critical role? And then what would you like to see, ideal case, if you hired somebody, what would that look like for that person in the future? Could you hire somebody by asking some different questions? Could you hire somebody who has leadership capabilities? So that way, that not only could they do their initial role, their entry point into your organization, but then they could give you the flexibility and be an option to potentially move into a leadership role. Even getting, so you got those basic components, having a benefit package that is going to attract the right folks for you, the right candidates. Because again, it doesn't, a lot of times people say, well, I can't afford the best top of the line of everything. And that's okay. You don't need to, because if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. But understanding, if you do A, what's B? If I have a benefit package that's and a compensation package that's in the middle, then be aware of the type of folks that you're going to attract, and you have to encompass that into your business plan, right? Because you're going to, it doesn't mean you can't be successful. It just means that you might have more turnover in positions. And so a lot of times, that's why I go back to, do you have critical roles? You probably don't want turnover in those critical roles, because that's a lot harder to overcome those types of turnover. And then basic things are like retention programs. So what are you doing to make the person, with the benefits, and making sure the person feels good about the decision to work with you? The complexity comes with, now, if the basics aren't working, and I'm not getting where I need to be at, what am I doing and to do more? Because as things have gotten more difficult with after the pandemic, and we have folks that have people working virtually, even though even in the franchise world, you might have key employees that are remote and they're not working at a location. How do you handle that? And it gets more and more complex. So making sure that you do certain things very well at a basic level, and then those the key sections in the process of the life cycle of your employees, making sure you identify what are the key ones, and being more complex. I think of those things. That's what I mean by the difference between a basic playbook and a more complex playbook.
Yeah, again, clearly a process, and that's going to simplify it, give you objective best practices that you can just execute on, and trial and error, get better with and fail forward with. But there's a best practices playbook, and that creates the simplicity of just focusing on executing. Tony, I'm curious, are personality tests at all involved in this?
I think it depends on the organization and the businesses I talk to. Some folks use personality tests, others do not. It's just like everything in life. My experience has been there's waves, and for a while there was a lot of personality tests going in, and then of course you end up with, sometimes there's backlash from doing certain things, or there's just changes. And so personality tests, I think that whatever instruments, really, that's what they're now, because of the time things have changed, hiring instruments, whatever it is. One, you want to make sure that instrument is legal and is going to, whatever instrument you're going to use, be aware of the potential outcomes of using that, right? Is it going to provide me exposure to something? If it provides you exposure to something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad decision, but are you prepared for that, and are you able to handle that? So really what it comes down to is making sure that for your business plan, your positions you're looking at, putting together a program, bringing in an HR expert, right? Bringing them in and making sure that you do put together the program that's going to make sense and give you the best chance, I think is the key to success. Whatever tools, whatever processes you put in place, taking the time and energy, because we're all so busy, but taking the time and energy to really figure that out, I think is critical for long-term success.
Absolutely. What are some current instruments that are best practices?
Well, from my perspective, when I look at best practices, and this was something that I last year I was involved with putting together a training program and providing it was a speaking opportunity as well. So I did a lot of research because they wanted updated information. And what I found, which was really interesting, was that it wasn't necessarily that there are specific instruments you should use, or specific tool like a brand name. But what it was interesting to find out is that the onboarding process, which we've all been a part of at one point in our life, right? Whether we ran it or did, has become critical to success. And it's amazing how many people leave jobs in the first 30 days and in the first 6 months. And if you want to avoid that dilemma, making sure you're aware of that and putting together a game plan to address that onboarding process, to me, that's a new thing I learned. And I think it seems to be amazingly important when you look at the statistics that are out there.
Clearly, the role is communicated one way up front. Onboarding is ensuring that that's fulfilled on the other side, right? So appropriate training and support once, once a part of the team. Is that what you're speaking around there?
Yeah.
Training and just the quality of being set up for success.
Yeah, it's about the employee experience. And I know, we all like, as owners, we all like to say, hey, well, I'm giving an opportunity, I'm giving you a job, I'm paying you, and that's fantastic. The world has changed. And it doesn't mean that that's a bad thought process and a bad business practice. And if you can make it work, you make it work. But if you really want to go flow kind of downstream with what the current landscape is, the playing field for employees, it's really about the employee experience. And so, you're attracting the best people, you're hiring them, you're onboarding them. And the onboarding isn't one day of just hey, here's your computer, here's who you talk to about this. No, the onboarding is helping affirm the decision that I made coming on board. So, I've joined you, Nick, and I'm on your team. This is your opportunity as the owner to make sure that you're affirming my decision. And so many times that is left out of the equation. And the reason why this has become important isn't something that is naturally you think of, right? But it's because what the studies show on exit interviews and third party surveys of why, when people leave and why did they leave. And the crazy part about it is that we go back and I think you had mentioned this earlier, communication is so basic, but so critical. And it's so left out because it goes, well, I'm so busy, I got these other things I got to do, because they haven't valued the communication and this part of the piece of the puzzle as equal to, hey, making sure they know how to use a cash register, or making sure they can go out to the site and properly communicate, with a homeowner of what you're going to do, and make sure you treat that homeowner correctly and make it a positive experience that you are there. Even when you leave, you take care of everything. And it's just because the value hasn't been there. But the value is, it's very obvious that the studies show that it's critical to make sure that you are taking time to communicate, because many times people are leaving and they never even, the person, the hiring, the manager, and that doesn't have to be the hiring manager, the manager didn't even know that they were not happy because they hadn't talked to them. Or the person left because they thought they were doing a horrible job, and it turns out they were doing a great job. And the first time they heard about it was when they gave the notice. And now it's usually too late, because let's face it, when somebody gives a notice that they're leaving, you may be able to keep them on board, but it's always going to be in the back of everyone's mind that person had a foot out the door. And so again, there's no black and white answers. This is a completely gray subject matter and a gray situation. There's levels to the situation. But being able to onboard them, affirming the decision, communicating with them, letting them have wins. I mean, here's the new thing that I've learned that, I never even thought of. Sometimes we did it by accident or just did it naturally just because I'm in a sales environment. So in sales, you have, hey, set this many appointments and we'll celebrate it. So that's pretty simple because that's the nature of the job. But in a lot of businesses, they don't have that. They don't have metrics that or milestones that you could create early to engage that person and to hit goal, and then take the time to recognize that person. And by the way, when we talk about recognition, it doesn't have to be a big gift or a fancy event or something like that. Simple recognition that, hey, you had a goal in 30 days of your job and you hit it. Congratulations. That goes so far. People feeling appreciated is so critical, because the times when people might get approached by another franchise, a competitor, or another brand, maybe a different, completely different industry, and they don't feel that they're loved and engaged with their current company, then they have a better chance of taking a listen to what the opportunity is. And sometimes you know what you have currently, and you're not 100% happy. Sometimes you lose people, and it's not the right decision for them to leave, but you as the owner, you still got to deal with now the fallout of that. So I tell you, onboarding, engaging, building strengths, having purpose, I think is critical. And then, like you said, training and developing for future. So making sure that, hey, this person may not be around in 3 years, but we don't need to. Let's minimize the chances of them leaving, and let's increase the chances of them staying, because in 3 years, most likely, if you're doing a good job with them, they are going to be value add, right? Or they're going to be moving on for a different reason, whether it's their choice or your choice. But it'll be for the right reasons. It's just not the long-term fit for either party.
My goodness, culture kicks strategies butt all day, every day, for this reason. Clearly. Right? This is a huge part of it. Culture creates, some pretty powerful movements, and that's the beauty of the underdog.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, why do you love franchising so much?
Well, from my perspective, first off, like I said, I love the idea of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that the whole model allows folks to be able to investigate that and give it a shot if that's what they want to do. So from my business perspective, even as early in my career, I'm a big fan of that. I love the idea that there is a business plan that you can execute, and if you do A, then B will happen. And I think that's the great part about the franchise model. But what I also like it from my perspective is that it allows what I do and what I have passion for to play very well in this space, because it's that little extra, that the human capital piece and being able to compete and helping these folks compete. I can come in and actually add value. Immediate value and also long-term value with folks. And I can't do that in all the spaces out there. There's other places I can do that in, but to me, that's one of the ones that is a lot of fun. I also am an outside the box thinker. Anybody who knows me, who's watching this right now, it would tell you, they'll just laugh and go, yeah, all the time outside the box. And what I think was so cool about the industry is that the box is always expanding and changing, right? There's always new ideas coming out, new ways to do the old idea, new industries, right? Think about the pet industry. Look how far it's come in just in the last decade or so. And I think that's exciting to me. And I think that's why I like the space so much. And then the last thing about it is I'm very competitive. Most owners are competitive. And when you think about the fact that it's so hard to find the talent, the best possible talent, because you just don't have the tools and resources to do that, then I'm able to bring in either directly or indirectly support to those owners and help them execute the human capital slice, whatever that is, and help them. That will help them execute the franchise plan. So I think it allows me to enjoy the space, enjoy the people, enjoy the stories, enjoy the subject matters, the different industries, the verticals, but then also be able to have an actual black and white. Hey, I actually can help a person or an entity or a business group be successful in executing their business plan.
Absolutely. You can see over 30 years of HR outsourcing on full display. It's really been a pleasure hearing what you have mastered and what you're passionate about. Clearly, this is something that you put a lot of work into and is a craft. I can relate to you in a lot of ways, and from that respect. So if anybody would like to get in touch with you, to learn more, how can they do that?
Well, Nick, first off, thank you very much for having me on board. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my passion and in your world and what you do. So I'm a huge fan of your show. One of the things that I love about the franchise businesses and the industry is that people share. They share ideas, and you've had some amazing guests on that. That's how I ended up getting to know you. And every week you have topics that I listen to and I learn from. So first off, thank you so much for even thinking of including me with your past and your future lineups of folks. That means a lot to me, and I'm really excited for what you're doing in your brand. As far as anybody wanting to talk to me, it's simple. You can reach out to me. You can send an email to me. That's T Winckowski at zynergiahr.com. That's really complicated, I know. So I apologize, but it's T and then my last name, WINCKOWSKI at Zynergia, which is right above my shoulder, HR.com. So you can reach out that way, or you can give me a call at area code 219-319-5083, 219-319-5083, and I would be more than glad to talk to you, more than glad to answer any questions, more than glad to chit chat, more than glad to direct you to folks. If I cannot directly help you myself, one of the things that's been exciting is building an ecosystem over the decades, and I'm sure I can help direct somebody into some directions that can help them solve whatever information they're looking for.
You heard him. Give him a call. It's the best way, right? I, as of late, have been joking because I've had some phone calls versus Zoom calls, and it's taken some folks back. It's funny how technology changes things, but nothing beats a phone call. Pick up the phone, give Tony a shout, and we have most certainly enjoyed you participating in today's show. Please subscribe, like, and most importantly, contribute, ask any questions. Tony, it's been a pleasure. And as always, level up.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Level Up with Nick Lopez show. Remember, it's never too late to get started on your entrepreneurial journey. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you enjoyed today's segment. Catch us again next week and visit limepainting.com for more of the Level Up with Nick Lopez show.